10. Namibia, $11,290. Namibia, located in the south of the continent, closes the top 10 richest African countries. Its GDP is based on the extraction and sale of diamonds and uranium. Namibia is an exception to the African rules in the sense that agriculture has not become its leading industry, accounting only for 6.2% of GDP and employing 16.3% of the population. The country has insufficient agricultural land, and only 1% of its territory is arable. But industry accounts for 30% of GDP, and 22.4% of workers are employed by local enterprises. Namibia is a very large supplier of diamonds on the world market. Their extraction is carried out by the Namdeb Company, the second part of whose name suggests control by South Africa's De Beers, the undisputed ruler of the diamond market. Gold, tin, zinc, uranium, cadmium and tungsten are also mined here. So metallurgy has become an important segment of the industry. But even with such a wealth of the country, unemployment here is at 30 to 40%, and the wages of workers are small. The average monthly income of $150 is distributed very unevenly. 9. Tunisia, $11,634. Tunisia, a Mediterranean country from North Africa, specializes in agriculture, oil extraction and tourism development. After several decades of economic stagnation, the country's economy finally began to be reformed, beginning in 1969 and accompanied by steady, though moderate, growth. These reforms included the privatization of state-owned enterprises, liberalization of the financial turnover and the trade system. Unprofitable cooperatives were abolished, but private enterprise and land ownership were encouraged. Now this agrarian country with gradually developing industry has reached the 36th position in the world. Tunisia produces and exports not much oil, but it brings the country additional currency, as well as the sale of semi-finished products from the processing of phosphate rock, olive oil and traditional Tunisian dates. Tourism has become an important source of state revenue because many people are attracted here by the famous ruins of Carthage. Tunisia is almost the most prosperous country in the Maghreb, and its respectability is very close to that of Europe. 8. Egypt, $12,554. The most important source of income for Egypt is not agriculture or tourism, as many would assume, but the collection of duties from foreign ships passing through the Suez Canal. These alone add up to more than $1 billion to the state treasury each year. Oil production and tourism come next. And agriculture ceased to be the main source of income after the 1952 revolution. The land suitable for cultivation is almost without exception in the Nile Delta, where it is divided into small peasant allotments. Therefore, the share of agriculture has fallen to 15.4% of the country's exports. The World Food Programme under the auspices of the UN found that 31% of local children aged 6 months to 5 years are trivially malnourished, and this figure in Egypt is one of the worst in the world. The country's government prefers to develop cities rather than the countryside, whose problems are little researched and spending is cut. Ridiculous subsidies, private sector monopoly, black market and corruption flourish in the country. Egypt's unemployment rate is high at 19%. 7. The Republic of South Africa, $13,225. South Africa remains the only country in Africa that is considered developed. And it owes this to the settlers from Europe and their descendants, who ruled there longer than in other African countries. They were able to develop the extraction of oil, diamonds, platinum, gold, as well as the production of machinery, cars, chemical products. To this day the Boers, descendants of immigrants from Holland, have a powerful influence on the country's economy. Agriculture, such as winemaking, is also well developed in South Africa. Although South Africa has a relatively high standard of living, it still has a large gap between the rich and the poor, though it is the same everywhere in the world. 6. Algeria, $15,026. Algeria is the world's 5th largest country in natural gas reserves, and its exports are second only to Russia. The country's largest oil and gas company, Sonatrach, provides up to 30% of the country's GDP and is owned by the state. After Algeria gained independence from France in 1964, its economy began to actively develop and take an increasingly prominent place in the development of the rest of Africa. It is the largest producer of liquefied natural gas on the continent, selling 8% of this fuel in the world, and is the 14th country in the world in terms of oil reserves. At the end of the last century, about a quarter of the Algerian population was employed in the agricultural sector, which contributed almost 12% to the country's budget. But even now there is a lot of unemployment in Algeria, since the working-age population of the country mostly has no professional education. Therefore, against the backdrop of unemployment, many businesses are in need of professional staff. In search of work, men migrate not only to the cities, but also to Europe, which is nearby. 5. Botswana, $17,042. This country is located in southern Africa and cannot boast of a climate. The Kalahari Desert, which occupies 70% of Botswana's territory, dictates its harsh orders here. The economy here is based on a variety of minerals: gold, platinum, diamonds, sulfur, asbestos, coal, bromine, talcum, chromium, uranium, and silver. The main wealth is diamonds. Industry accounts for almost 33% of GDP. Naturally, the mining industry is in the lead, generating 45% of the country's foreign exchange earnings. Botswana holds first place in the world in terms of the value of diamonds produced. Agriculture contributes only 1.8% of GDP, although it employs 16% of the working-age population. On the other hand, the country has the second highest HIV prevalence rate in the world, which is a direct threat to Botswana's economic development. 4. Gabon, $19,056. This Central African country is located in a humid equatorial forest zone on the Atlantic coast. Over 80% of its inhabitants are urban dwellers. The country produces gas, oil, uranium, and manganese. In the past, Gabon was a French colony, which achieved independence in 1960. In memory of the colonial past, the country inherited the official language French. The combination of huge reserves of excellent timber and minerals, on the one hand, and a small population, on the other hand, has put Gabon among the most prosperous African countries. But even here the wealth is unevenly distributed. Life in a large modern city, such as the capital Libreville, is not the same as in the small villages lost in the jungle, where it is the same as it was centuries ago. 3. Mauritius, $20,422. Mauritius is located east of Madagascar. Its economy is quite diversified. In addition to tourism, sugar production is developed here under sugar cane. There are almost 90% of cultivated land. There is also the textile industry. In recent years, Mauritius has become an offshore, began to develop banking, catching and processing of fish. There are already more than 32,000 offshore companies. 9% of the population works in agriculture, 30% in industry, but most of all in services, -61%. The sale of sugar contributes a quarter of the treasury, even though a severe drought in 1999 almost deprived the country of its crops. The Mauritian government is keen to attract foreign investment, which has already totaled $1 billion. Some 9,000 foreign companies have already been accredited here, of which many have commercial activities in South Africa and India. The country's economy is gradually growing, and with it, employment. It has only 2% unemployment and 10.6% of the population below the poverty line. 2. Republic of Seychelles, $27,602. Seychelles is an archipelago located northeast of Madagascar and 1,600 kilometers from the African coast. The country thrives on tourism, which is supported by a stable warm climate, excellent nature, well-developed infrastructure, security, and a high human development index. This positive effect has helped the country to achieve the program of economic reforms, which the government launched after the financial crisis of 2008, as well as investments in tourism and diversification of the economy. In addition, oil and gas exploration is actively going on in the waters of the islands. If successful, the domestic income of the Seychelles could increase even more significantly. 1. Equatorial Guinea, $38,639. This country is located near the equator on the shores of the Gulf of Guinea in the Atlantic Ocean. The country's budget relies on the export of oil, of which there are large reserves. Exports are also helped by the country's advantageous geographical position, which has access to the ocean, from where tankers carry oil to Europe and America. That's why Equatorial Guinea has a very high GDP, with the IMF ranking it 24th in the world. According to this indicator, this country has surpassed not only Russia, Spain, Israel, but even Great Britain, France and Italy. The average wage here has risen to $1,000, which has led to Equatorial Guinea experiencing a surge of money-hungry people from other African states. The country's oil miracle began in the 1990s. A high GDP is, of course, wonderful, but the people of the country do not have such a sweet life, because the income from oil extraction is distributed very unevenly. That is why there is a handful of rich people bathed in luxury and almost half of the country's population, who remain below the poverty line.